So last August, we just touched upon the Book of Fate, following upon the choice made by Savitri. Soon after the Book of Love, the Book of Fate. Fate is a very interesting dimension of human life and experience, because it conjures in itself the past, the present and the future. There is the past which is unrolling, unfolding itself. There is the present which is determining the future, and there is the future which is pulling us. All these three come together in a single word called fate. To understand fate is to understand the creation and the creator and his relation with creation. That's why in Indian thought the term is bhagya, and it comes from the same root, bhag, from which we have bhagya, and the same root leads to Bhagwan. And the root means two things simultaneously. It's amazing how the Vedic rishis, how they beautifully used words. So bhag means enjoyment. And it also means bhag, share, portion. So literally it means our portion of enjoyment of life, if we want to put it like that. So it is our share. We may want a larger share, or we may think that we deserve a smaller share. But there is a share, portion of enjoyment which is marked out for us, and every creature has it, because without that one cannot sustain life journey. But the problem with man is that he doesn't look at the portion of joy that he has got, but the portion of joy that the neighbor has got. And there starts the problem. So, Bhag is not, he is one of the four great deities of Vedic pantheon, standing at the doors of the sun. So, he is the deity sometimes equated as the sun itself. So, there are hymns in the Rig Veda to Bhag Savitri. So many Vedic lords identify fate, actually they use the word enjoyment, as the sun god himself. But these are the four deities, Varuna and Mitra, which are in one pair, vastness, and along with vastness, harmony and love, Varuna and Mitra, the two pairs. And then we have another pair, which is Ariman and Bhag. So Ariman is the battler, he fights. And Bhag, they work together. So if we can fight the battle of life, we get our share of the joy of life. And we shrink from the battle of life, then obviously the share will come, but perhaps we will not be able to really enjoy it. So two things come very beautifully from this. One is that fate is not about punishing anyone. There is a portion. We have put in an effort today, yesterday, and we will get its share. So where does pain come from? Pain comes from ignorance. That is the problem. It's our misreading of life's intent, our wanting more, our wanting something else than what we have got. But if we really take in its origin, the task of fate is to distribute everyone its share of joy. And if pain comes, we have to battle it. That's the basic truth behind it. So Narada, the divine messenger, comes with the word of fate, and I hope it was fated that you played this music. So, which is like an initiation by the mother in her voice about the book of fate, as Narada comes carrying the word of fate. This foresight is concealed normally from men, except for those who are marked out for a certain mission. They carry it inside them like a conviction. Like Sri Aurobindo says that right at a young age he had the conviction that he is born to bring great changes in the world, or rather great changes are going to come and he is going to play a central part in it. Similarly, we see the mother before even coming to Pondicherry around 1912, 1911, she chalks out a whole program for the future. And later on we see the ashram, Auroville, Sri Aurobindo Society, many things coming up which are part of that program individual and collective harmony, the advent of a new race, all this, they are born with this conviction. But for most of us, the face of fate is concealed. Many times, even from the gods, they do not know what is going to happen. They just play their part. They do not know the long-term repercussions. So this is how Sri Aurobindo, with the touch of divine irony, fate always carries with it a smiling irony. So when it is indulging, there is simultaneously within it a sense of foreboding, as if this smile that nature has granted for a moment may be snatched away the next moment. So it is a very amazing dimension of human existence. And that's why it fascinates all of us, it attracts us. It's a tangled web. And no wonder Sri Aurobindo, the master poet, the master artist, the master of masters, he is here to unravel this tangled web for us. We had stopped on page 425. Savitri has opened the doors of a kind of fate by her choice. So our own choice seems to open the doors of fate, but there are many aspects to it, and Sri Aurobindo brings it out at several places, that how when Savitri is going for the quest, we read this message yesterday, the darshan message, she comes across many seers and sages, goes to many ashramas, and the message was about one of the places where people would go and drink back that peace, that calm by the influence. But none of these places she finds her ideal partner and mate. She finds him in the forest verge. And there she sees Satyavan and makes a choice, comes back and announces. And these words are very powerful, which we had read last time, page 424. My father, I have chosen, this is done. This is a very, very powerful canto. It's like the beauty of Sri Aurobindo is that whatever book he takes up or whatever aspects he takes up, he is completely identified with that character, with that force, that aspect of existence. So in Book of Love, we see the master lover leaning out from his closed doors and filling us with the sweetness and bliss of love. It's when we read the Book of Love. But when we read the Book of Fate, it seems, as we go through the pages, that the one who writes the fate of mankind and of creation, he himself is telling us what fate is. So look at these marvelous lines when he says, Father, I have chosen, this is done. So Savitri comes and tells this to Dhimatsena, to Ashwapati. And Ashwapati sees a light suddenly chasing away shadow. So he has his own way of looking into things. And then we had these wonderful lines which in a way summarize. He looked into his daughter's eyes and spoke. So a day will come when humanity will make choices based on this vision. Right now we start calculating. You have chosen Satyavan. Did you get his kundali with you? No, he lives in forest. He doesn't remember his date of birth. Is he a Manglik? All these things. But this is such an inferior knowledge. But what is true knowledge? He looks into her eyes and sees and reads. He's a tapasvi. And he says something very interesting. Well hast thou done, and I approve thy choice. How, with such a marvelous simplicity, Sri Aurobindo opens a whole world of understanding. So very often people ask, what is the role of kundli and horoscope and all these things in marriage? The Lord has in one stroke kept it aside. The marriage of Savitri and Satyavan is not based on any horoscope. It's based on something very, very intrinsic and inner. This is how in original Indian thought also we see that how there is something much greater than all these stars. They are just scripts. They do not determine our fate. They simply write. They have half written our things. But our soul can rewrite it. Our soul can write a new story. So he says, I approve thy choice. If this is all, then all is surely well. If there is more, then all can still be well. This is the Kalyan Shraddha with which Sri Aurobindo wants us to lead life. That whatever it be, we should live with this thought that all will be well. Why not? Even if there is danger and doom, it will pass away. Ultimately, one thing is there that no doom can take away, and that Sri Aurobindo has told us at the very beginning, the crown of conscious immortality, the Godhead promised to our struggling souls, when first man's heart dared death and suffered life. So that's a promise, and that remains. All other things may come and will go, they will change, but one thing is there which nothing can take away. So he says that all can still be well, whether it seem good or evil to men's eyes. So our eyes, of course, see a partial thing. That's why, though Bhag gives us only our share of joy, but we see only what we have not got, and we lament and we suffer. We want joy in a certain way. So Narada had once this, Narada who is revealing the, who is right now the hero in the plot, he also once asked the Lord that, you see, I am your bhakta and you give such lovely fate to everybody, and I am very happy with my fate, but I sometimes wish that I could also marry someone very beautiful in my life. So Lord says, go try. What stops you? He says, but who is going to, like me? Please do something, do a makeover of my face so that, people get drawn or whatever. So the Lord says, you go, I'll do what is needed for you. So with trust he goes, sits in a swamvar. And everybody starts laughing again and again. And he thinks that he is the most handsome prince and he is going to be chosen. He is going to experience the joys of worldly life. And everybody laughs. Till finally he confronts the mirror and sees the Lord had, by his own wisdom, turned his face into a monkey's. And Narada is disappointed, angry, and he curses the Lord. You made me a monkey? One day only a monkey will save you. You have to face now the monkey in your life. So as it goes that Vishnu had to come as Rama and find all the monkeys around him. But look at how beautifully this small little story is there, that Narada wants a fate. And he is the Lord's devotee, his loved one, his preferred one, his chosen one. But even he can't have his say. So very often in our relation with the divine, we want something, and if the divine doesn't give it to us, we end up saying, you are so cruel. Like Narada react, that you made me a monkey. But if only we could say, all must always be well. If you have chosen this, if you have made me a monkey, so be it. You know better. So here Ashwapati has that Kalyan Shraddha. So he says, whether it seem good or evil to men's eyes, only for good the secret will can work. So regardless of the moment, the secret will only works for good. So that is why Bhag is a god who works only to prepare us, give us our portion of joy, and he comes with Ariman to prepare us for the ultimate delight. And that ultimate delight is possible only when we ascend to the throne of truth, home of truth. Our destiny is written in double terms. Through nature's contraries, we draw nearer God. And at one place, Mother says, pleasure is a very deceptive thing. See how our values and divine values are so different. Just as human sense of justice and divine sense of justice are so different. From a human point of view, when Rama is banished into the forest, it's a gross injustice. Kekai has asked, no doubt she had the right to ask. But what a thing she has asked. Gross injustice. This shouldn't have happened to Rama. He is a god after all. And suddenly, last minute, the throne is snatched away from him. But if that wouldn't have happened, divine justice would not have manifested. Kishkinda would not have been blessed, and Dandakaranya would not have been freed of the demons, Lanka would not have been conquered, Ravana would not have been vanquished. All this because of one human injustice, doors of divine justice open for humanity. And the same we find in Mahabharata, Krishna's preferred, favored, chosen one. And of all of them, the most chosen one, Draupadi, what a fate she brings with her. Humiliation, pain, suffering, ignominy, banishment. There is nothing which she has not suffered. And that's why Draupadi and Savitri's story come interconnected. Savitri's story is narrated when Yudhishthira asks sage Markandeya that is there anyone who has suffered more than Draupadi, who is as noble as her and yet suffered? And then he says, yes, there is someone in way back times who had this kind of a fate but conquered it. So, that's a story of conquest. So, our measure of what is justice, because it's based on the sense that this is mine, but fate acts on the basis of oneness. It does not act on the basis of each one, if this patta is transferred in your name, so the land is yours. Fate doesn't work like that. That is human way of looking at things. Whereas from the divine sense, everything belongs to the divine. So what you have to get, you will get. There is a place, there is a share of joy given to everybody. And we cannot snatch it away. We may try, but we cannot snatch it. Even if we get it by force, we will lose it. So Ravana thought that he has Sita, the power, with him. But it ultimately brought doom. So even when we try to snatch it, the same thing we see in Helen of Troy. That Paris snatches, but eventually it brings only doom. It's not about just justice. It's a share which we have to get, and nothing more and nothing less. So our destiny is written in double terms. Through nature's contraries, we draw nearer God. So pleasure very often may still keep us away, but pain takes us closer. It shakes us from our comfort zones. So when things go well, of course, it is God's grace. When they don't go well, it is certainly God's grace. That part is, we may doubt when things are going well, we may doubt. Maybe it's God's grace, but we should take it with a pinch of salt. Who knows? But when things don't go well, 100% it is God's grace. So it seems like that destiny is written in double terms, because eventually, through everything, we move near God. Out of the darkness, we still grow to light. So we grow out of ignorance towards wisdom. Someone very beautifully, there was a nice little card with, I remember long back seeing, where there was a ship facing the storm. And there were just two lines. Wisdom is the light that comes after weathering the storm. So it's not given before. Perhaps if it's given before, we will not value it. So it's something which we have to hold. So very often when people, even today I had somebody who was telling me, I want my child to read Mother and Sri Aurobindo, what Mother has written. Why don't you tell the person what Mother has written? It doesn't work like that. It will just come and go away. Mahipal, you can come here. So it can just come and go away, and it will lead to, very often it's not treasured, not valued. So it's something which comes as we go through life. It struggles. And then when we go through the challenge, then this wisdom comes in its true sense. Otherwise we read and we forget. And we find it very nice and beautiful. So here it is. Out of the darkness, we still grow to light. Death is our road to immortality. It's the famous Upanishadic phrase that through death we arrive at immortality. So every time death comes to show us the limits of our endeavor. So we start from that level. Next time we learn, because in one go we cannot learn everything. So death comes and takes away, okay, fine, you have learned so much, reach this point, so start afresh. So we start afresh, but that knowledge is not forgotten. That's the beauty and that's the advantage. It gets embedded in the soul. It's like an essence. It's not remembered in details, but the essence of that knowledge is there. And we start from that base and climb further, go to a point, then death comes again. So again and again, the forms get broken, but the essence it not lost, and it rebuilds itself once again. Cry woe, the world's lost voices wail, yet conquers the eternal good at last. And I think this is the best thing to remember and keep the conviction. Today I was sharing with my friend that this is really the fact, not even a fact, that whatever may happen, truth is going to win and it is going to destroy falsehood. How many coats falsehood may wear over itself? Colors, paints, masks, but truth will emerge. Even if it is, bottled inside a iron wall and cage, it will emerge. So Kansa tried to do it, put it in a prison, it emerged. Hiranyakashipu tried to do it, isolate it, it emerged. This is a story. This is just not possible that one can forever deny truth. Whatever is truth will emerge despite all circumstances. And the beauty of this thought is, it sets the heart at peace and ease. Otherwise, we are all the time struggling. There is a beautiful prayer of the mother that human beings do something which puts them into unnecessary struggle. We decide beforehand. She says that why decide beforehand which particular circumstances are going to be good and beneficial or not. So we decide beforehand. So we may decide, no, I can do sadhana only if I come to ashram. Whereas by this thought beforehand, we lose a lot of opportunity that we are getting in everyday life because we are thinking beforehand. And then she says, and they launch themselves into a bitter struggle to change circumstances. So this is just the opposite way of doing things. The real way is, she says, in fact, someone asked her that, what if one has mother, I know that I shouldn't have attachments, etc., but I have attachments, I have preferences. What should I do? So mother gives a very beautiful, simple reply. She says, our experience has shown, what a beautiful reply, our experience has shown that if you do something forcibly or abruptly, it does not help. Rather, focus on the truth of your being and the circumstances will automatically adjust themselves. So the key is from within outwards. If the goal is to find the divine, the focus is on finding the divine and not on particular space or particular persons. Very often people say, oh, if only this person was not there in my life, I would have found God. Perhaps the person should say, thank God this person is there in my life so I can find God. It's a way of looking at it. So people change persons and they end up losing the person and losing God. Whereas if they could only take it that this is my goal, doesn't matter. People are there, circumstances are there, doesn't matter. But nobody can come between me and my quest. How can anyone and anything come? If I am really sincere, nothing can come. Everything can become a catalyst and a feeder. And the day the circumstances are no more necessary for a particular kind of progress, they will just go away. They will no more affect me. It will be irrelevant. Their presence or absence will make no change at all. So instead of trying to change things outwardly, we should only remember that eternal good is going to conquer and focus upon it. So look what a beautiful sutra it is. Yet conquers the eternal good at last. So Ashwapati in few lines summarizes a deep truth. And then he remembers that the queen is sitting by his side because he has spoken very cryptically. Then might the sage have spoken, but the king in haste broke out and stopped the dangerous word because he has seen the light is chasing the shadow. So he doesn't want the queen to know these, sometimes too large a wisdom, to tell somebody, don't worry. What if you will die? God will come to take you. So the man will get very annoyed. What do you mean I am going to die? He is not listening to the other part that God is going to come and take me. I remember a friend who told his grandfather, why you are so much worried if you have chest pain? आपने तो गीता का बहुत अध्ययन किया है. You have read Gita. You know that the soul is immortal. His grandfather got so annoyed that after his death he came to his dream, made him experience the pain. And then he said, now do you understand what I was experiencing? It's a real experience of someone. And this man woke up with perspiration. So this knowledge is all right for someone who is ready for this knowledge, but not for everyone. Of course, the fact that we are all reading Savitri, we are all ready for this knowledge. So he tells Narada, O singer of the ultimate ecstasy, lend not a dangerous vision to the blind. So it's a great, people often say that man does not know his fate. If only we knew it. Thank God we do not know. It's a boon that we are covered. As they say, ignorance is bliss. If we knew, life may be terrible, because at the moment of birth we will see that at the moment of death none will be by our side. The child on whom we are lavishing so much love, when we are gone, will say good riddance. Thank God they are not there to trouble us. So it will bring lot of chaos. So he says, lend not a dangerous vision to the blind, because by native right thou hast seen clear. Impose not on the mortal's tremulous breast the dire ordeal that foreknowledge brings. Demand not now the Godhead in our acts. Foreknowledge is not necessarily something good. Good from it's not something which will make us happy, because invariably we will see many things that are going to come. We had this wonderful version of the Mahabharata, the new one. It's really, it is an upgraded version, better than B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata, because B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata was made from a socialist point of view. So he tried to see in Mahabharata more of the, from the point of view of social justice, etc. But the present one has been made by somebody who has a mystic heart and can read things. So there suddenly Draupadi keeps asking Krishna, tell me what's going to happen, what's going to happen. So just for a moment he gives her a flash. And he says, no, except these 5 Pandavas, your husband, nobody is going to survive from either side. And then she remembers that means Abhimanyu is there, so many others are there, they are all going to die. And then her heart is full of anxiety. And suddenly she says, I don't want this war. Then Krishna gives her a choice that, are you sure? Because you are standing at a moment of destiny. It is fated. It is divine will. There is a wisdom which has brought the 2 armies for a clash. If you want to change, you have a choice. But feel inside. And then she goes and eventually agrees and consents to the massacre. So many times if we would know, we would perhaps try to change course, but since we are still puppets, fate will find its way, but through much more complex and tortuous things. It will find its way, because we are, by changing circumstances, we are not going to change, what experience we have to go through. That's why in the ashram context, it's often said, if you are having problem in a department, don't change it. You will go and face the same music in another department. It's a very simple thing and such a profound wisdom, because invariably we try to change people, we face the same problem, same issue. So he says, don't lend this vision. And then with the deep compassion, he says, here are not happy peaks, the heaven nymphs roam, or Kailash. See the words, Shubindu, several places brings the Bengali accent. In some of his writings, Ulupi, Arjuna is very often with you. Arjuna, that's how it is. So here it is Kailash. So Coilash. So he doesn't write it the way we write Kai. On Kailash or Vaikuntha's starry stair. So he says, don't reveal this, don't think that this is your Vaikuntha, where you can see all things and not care about it. The way Shubindu describes Ilion, the war. And there is a scene which is a very touching scene. That Zeus comes down, and as he comes down, the day is shown when Zeus has decided that the war will take place and there will be massacre. And Zeus comes down and looks upon women sending their children to school. They are very happy, telling them bye bye, packing their tiffins, and they are preparing for the husbands who will come back from the field. And the fire is there, some person is singing, the market is buzzing. And Zeus looks upon all this and knows that the whole scene will change by evening. It will be full of fire and the roar of death. It's a amazing, marvelous, from the point of view of poetry. The most difficult thing in art is to mix two absolutely contrary emotions. And I believe only divine can do it, and the sign of a great artist is that he can mix two contrary emotions and blend them beautifully. So he sees on one side this, on one side he knows what he has decided. And then he goes back and tells all the gods, I have taken this decision and don't interfere. In any case, this is going to be. You play your role. Now imagine that all of them, some was expecting that my child will come back in the evening, my husband will come back, and we will have see a movie together or sit and have a quiet moment. But it has been fated, destined. It's going to be destroyed. So from that height, it doesn't matter. It's like stepping on a group of ants. That's how when nature moves. This is also described in Savitri, that when nature moves, it doesn't care that it breaks so many hearts. When mother was asked this question that, destiny works like that, she said, you don't know the proportion in which nature moves. Even material nature, how powerful it is. The entire galaxies, material galaxies, the stars drifting all around, the power, the force, the energy. Mother nature, materially, just material nature, leaving aside everything, embodies that. Now with that vastness, when she moves, she puts a step, and 10,000 ants are crushed below the feet. When we walk, we don't care. We don't care whether we step upon a flower, whether we step upon ants. We don't care even if we break human beings. Forget about ants and people whom we can see. But from God we expect that He should care about it. And yet, what is amazing is that in spite of all this, the divine still, for his bhakta, he is able to find him, locate him amidst tragedies and save him. This is amazing. This Kedarnath, it took place, and Anand Bhai was telling his story that how when that Ganges suddenly took that form of destroyer. She is a tremendous power. She can destroy many things. She not only destroys ignorance and gives moksha, she can submerge civilizations. She is a tremendous power. And when Mandakini came, Alaknanda and Mandakini came through that path, demolishing everything, what a devastation took place. And yet, he described that how they were coming back from Badrinath, and suddenly they would miss by a stone or miss by just fractions of few hours. It's so amazing that even there the divine is able to find where his children are and save. That is the beauty. But of course, that's a rare thing. So what is here? Abrupt, jagged hills, only the mighty climb, are here where few dare even think to rise. So he tells Narad, you are singer of the ultimate ecstasy. You will tell this and go back to Vaikuntha. But you don't know that every step we take is a step towards danger of the unknown. So please don't say this, because here the climb is very different. Far voices call down from the dizzy rocks. Too hard the gods are with man's fragile race. In their large heavens they dwell exempt from fate, and they forget the wounded feet of man. So this is the difference between gods and the avatar. The avatar knows the touch of tear, in mortal things. Very often people say, and even in Ramayana it is there, that Rama was an avatar, but then why was he doing Vilap for Sita? Well, if he wouldn't have done Vilap for Sita, he would have never understood the human agony. So the avatar becomes human. There is a very beautiful small little essay of Sri Aurobindo, of Nalnida, about teardrop in the eye of the divine. When Sri Aurobindo in 1918, when Mrinalini Devi passes away, his wife, on her way to Kolkata, she is struck with malaria and she dies. And she was planning to come to Pondicherry. And then when Sri Aurobindo receives the telegram, there is a teardrop in his eye. And he says it's a perfect identification with earth. At that one moment, the Lord knows the entire agony which we feel. Kailash and Vaikunth don't feel it. For the gods, it's a play. They are fine. They don't descend into earth. It's very difficult. Mother says, I asked all the gods that I am going to bring down supramental creation. Will you come? She says, not a single god accepted except Krishna. Of course, it was Krishna's work. So he fused with the body of Sri Aurobindo. Krishna came down. This is just before 24th November 1926. Shiva said, no, I will not take a human body, but I will help. He's a mighty God. Strong, powerful. But taking a human body is misery. It's to be confined, to be limited. And she says, only Krishna agreed and accepted to this work. No one would confine himself. So he's telling Narada that, see, you will say, go away, and then you will sing ecstasy, and the Lord will rejoice in heavens. But you will leave the queen to weep, and I have to console her. That no, Narada didn't mean this, he didn't mean that. Please try to understand what Narada actually meant. And there will be a big fight. So he is trying to stall it. His limbs that faint beneath the whips of grief. His heart that hears the tread of time and death. The future's road is hid from mortal sight. He moves towards a veiled and secret face. To light, one step in front is all his hope, and only for a little strength he asks. So that's all that human beings seek. Even if sometimes it brings misery. The mother says that how contradictory wills work in us. She says that there was a child who wanted to, an adolescent, who wanted to pursue yoga. And he would keep saying that my father stops me, my father stops me. So he prayed to the divine. My father stops me. And I want to pursue yoga, and he is the one person who is not letting me come. Suddenly his father was struck with a serious illness. And when he was on his deathbed, the boy started praying, please help my father to recover. Please help my father to recover. This is a story the mother has told. So the father recovered. Now the moment the father recovered, he said, no. He said, because of my prayers you have recovered, now let me go. No, don't talk nonsense. I know better than you. You are trying to fool me. The doctors gave the medicines and I recovered. And see, it is a sign that you should be near me and take care of me. Now that I am ill, you better not go. So, he says again, he felt that he is caught in the same trap. So, here we want only one thing. We don't know what's going to happen next and how dangerous good fortune can be and how beautiful what we call as ill fortune can be. And only for a little strength he asks to meet the riddle of his shrouded fate. Awaited by a vague and half-seen force, aware of danger, to his uncertain hours, he guards his flickering yearnings from her breath. He feels not when the dreadful fingers close. See, here Sri Aurobindo has used the word yearnings. All that we desire, we try to guard it. It could also apply to earnings. I know a real story of someone who put his money in the stock market. So he gave a very nice justification. I will offer to mother. Now, if you have to offer whatever you had. But it was a very nice justification that I'll offer to mother. So it started with some few hundred rupees, long way back. It grew into thousands and grew into lakhs. And he didn't offer. And eventually, he lost his mind. So when he lost his mind, he forgot that he is owning so much money. So the condition came to such an extent that when idli and samar was one day given to him in our nursing home, where he is not supposed to pay anything, this is part of it. So he said, I don't know, you are giving me this, but I don't have money. How will I pay for this? How much this cost? So somebody joked, which was a bad joke of course, but joked and said, it's 10 rupees. I don't have, I can't pay. I can't have this. I'm telling you a real story. And when he died, guess how much money he had in his account? 1 crore plus. So he wants to guard, safeguard. Earnings applies to yearnings also. Yearnings and earnings. Not knowing what's going to happen next. Whether that money will be blown up by the child for whom one is safeguarding. So, of course, to some extent it's all right. But when it goes beyond, when we begin to enter into that race like a greed, then nature recoils. So, he feels not when the dreadful fingers close around him with the grasp none can elude. If thou canst lose her grip, then only speak. So he says, you can speak. Narada, I am not stopping you, but only if you can change that fate. At one place, mother says something very beautiful. That people often complain. Of course, every place she says everything beautiful, but one of the things, she says that, people often complain about this person or that person. They criticize. So mother says, don't do it because no one knows how to judge. And she says, if you are given that eye of judgment, then don't criticize, change the person. So, it's no point actually, because if we cannot change, and every time we criticize and complain, the person becomes more defensive, more and more, resistant. Even when people ask, they come and ask that I want to know, one should be very careful. Because very often it's to strengthen one's own ideas about oneself. So he tells Narad, you may speak, but please think before you speak. If by speaking you can also give a way. Now here again Sri Aurobindo is cutting a very interesting joke. Because very often people say, ki, this is going to happen in your future. And if you do this particular anusthan, you will be saved from it. Now whether actually something was going to happen and the anusthan saved or not, we don't know. But the man has definitely secured for himself a little more of bank balance. Well, he has to also live his life, and where everybody is making money out of fooling others, he has also done his bit. There is a man who sits with parrot, by the way, on nearby when we walk towards the sea. It's very interesting with the parrot and all those. I get very tempted just to see what this is. It's something so fascinating to see the parrot taking out your fate. And there are people who go and see. And he says that's not how it is. So it's not easy to change things. And if it's not easy to change it, why know it? Why not do what is best at a given moment? How is foreknowledge going to help? So he tells Narada, you can speak only if you can change. And then he says, perhaps from the iron snare, there is escape. Our mind perhaps deceives us with its words and gives the name of doom to our own choice. So he gives again a sutra that maybe that there is a way to escape it. But the problem is that we are the one who has made the choice. It is not somebody else who can change it. We have to change it by our own choice. And we have chosen, and the doom we have prepared. Perhaps from the iron snare there is escape. Our mind perhaps deceives us with its words and gives the name of doom to our own choice. Perhaps the blindness of our will is fate. Blindness of will, because the will which is given to us can change things. It has the power. But it is given to all kinds of things. It becomes weak. It throws into this desire, this so-called need, that so-called need, this acquisition, this achievement. And therefore it becomes weak. It becomes blind. It doesn't know what it really wants. So one of the best prayer is that, Mother, I don't know what I want. You give me what you think is really needed. Like Amrita, when mother kept asking him on his birthday, what do you want? And he kept silent. I'll give you whatever you want. And he kept silent. You want mukti? I can give you that. Kept silent. Everybody is nudging him. Ask. So then mother again, Amrita. So Amrita says, give me 2 banyans, mother. At this point, that's all I need. So people asked him, why did you ask such a foolish thing? You are an idiot. Don't you see? Mother was opening the doors of mukti. Says, you don't understand. This is all her way of playing with us. Of course she can give it. She can give anything. She doesn't need me to ask her. This is, why did you ask? अरे माँ के बात का सम्मान तो रखना है. The world mother is asking me, ask something. How can I not obey her? So what popped up in my mind was, yes, I need 2 banyans, so I have asked for 2 banyans. So what is our blind will? It doesn't know what it wants. So we end up by our own blind will asking things, working for things, striving for things, which in the end become like iron snares around our feet. And then we ask for something else, and that also becomes a snare, and then something else. So ultimately, he says that it is our own will, it is our own choices. So who can help? So he tells Narada, what is the point of saying? Even if you were to say, if there is an escape, it is in ourselves. You cannot change anything. So better keep quiet, better don't say. We'll stop with these few lines, last few lines, and then meet after 10 minutes. If thou canst lose her grip, then only speak. Perhaps from the iron snare there is escape. Our mind perhaps deceives us with its words and gives the name of doom to our own choice. Perhaps the blindness of our will is fate. So we will stop here, come back at 6:15, 6:20 and read the rest of it.